had, and she gifted it to me.
Wow.
And quite recently, actually, I paid it forward to a real big fan of Bibi's who she had purchased a copy of that same painting, and I felt inspired. You know what? I need to pay that forward because it's going to be more meaningful to this lady who's a big fan of B.B. King than me. And so it's a small world, and there's a lot of goodness in it. And I think by listening to my heart and staying out of my head, some really amazing things have happened in my short life as a professional artist.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I had never heard that before, Russell. That's fantastic. I think one of the things that speaks to me, what you're sharing, is connections. For me, a lot of people ask me, "How did you get to know all these people?" And I said, "It's nothing about me. It's about the ability to connect with people." And again, that comes back from my passion and straight from the heart. I have a real desire to, as I said at the beginning of the show, to make a difference in people's lives, to connect with them, to hear their story, help them succeed. I don't know if I told you, but I was telling our tech person, Karina, on the show that somebody today thanked me for interviewing them on the radio because that gave them a start to having their own podcast. And it's just a really very nice note that I really treasured, and that came today. And again, it comes through connection, of the desire to want to connect with people and learn about them, because I've learned so much about life by listening to other people. That has been, I guess, one of my successes is to take that passion and turn it into something that's going to help people heal, help people succeed, help people in their journey on life. I remember just recently, actually, I've just submitted a chapter for a book through Coach on Fire Radio, and it talks about the connection and how connecting with people has really helped me to be where I am today. It's been an amazing journey, and so in this chapter I write about what I learned from John Maxwell. One of the coaching things that I got back from the first draft was, talk about a teaching moment. And as I was reading this, maybe an hour later, I read something from Maxwell, and he talks about a fellow traveler moment. And he says, the reason I refer to a fellow traveler moment, because we're all on the same journey. We're all on the same earth together. We're going, the path may be a little bit different. It's the journey on this earth. And if I can help somebody in that being a fellow traveler, then hey, that's part of fulfilling my goal or my mission in life.
You never know what kindness authentically given to another human being will mean in their life. I think that's one of the things that you're tapping into, and there is great joy in doing that, and sometimes you get to hear the magic after it happens, and sometimes you don't. I think as you were talking, I was remembering one of the annual traditions that I have as an artist is on Remembrance Day here in Canada. My way of remembering is asking people if they could, what veteran would they want me to paint? And I do a contest. And on the morning of Remembrance Day, I draw and somebody gets a free painting of a loved one. Wow. And the first year that I did that, it was the fellow I ended up painting was the chaplain of the Canadian Navy during the Second World War. He was the chaplain of the fleet was his title. And the fellow that had asked me to paint it really was asking on behalf of, I think it was his grandmother, who's the daughter of this man. And the grandmother and her sister who is still alive. So I painted it, and he provided me the address. They lived on Prince Edward Island. And so I shipped it off. They had no idea who I was. They didn't know this was happening. So this package arrives in their mail. And the impact that it had on them, and they then followed it up with this most beautiful letter. They have it up on the wall, and they talk to their dad every day.
Wow.
And so you just don't know, when you provide a kindness, an authentic kindness to another human being, the difference that it will make. And I think that in what we do, Stephen, this is the blessing that you and I get to experience time and time again. And whether it's a young person who's an aspiring artist, or an older person that really has a desire to return to a creative activity, and a little bit of encouragement and guidance can mean a world of difference. And it's nice to be in a position to be able to offer that now that we're older and wiser.
That's true. It reminds me of a time I was visiting with somebody. This is while I was still a pastor in St. John's, Newfoundland. And so we're sitting on the couch, and this gentleman says, he says, "Remember that sermon you preached about 5 years ago?" And he said, you said this and this. And I said, "Wow." I said, "Bob," I said, I don't remember that." He said, "Well, I do." And he said, that piece of advice, or what I said, he said, was life-changing for me. And I really appreciate it. I want to tell you that. And I think that kind of goes back to what, some of the things that we have done in moments of kindness and out of our heart, we forget. But it made a great imprint on their life. And I love that. I absolutely love that. We're talking tonight. What's that?
I was interviewing a principal of one of the local schools, and he was telling a story that he's been a teacher for, I think, about 20 years, and he'd been invited to the wedding of a student that he had taught 10 years ago. And he said something to the effect, that student doesn't remember a single thing I taught him in the classroom, but he remembers how I treated him. And that's what matters. They remember how you made them feel.
That's right. I think that's the most important thing, Russell. We're talking tonight with Russell Thomas, a Fort McMurray-based visual artist who, at the ripe old age of 47, developed a style of portraiture that is completely unique. Russell, talk about this, because it's interesting to me, because I have seen one of your paintings that's normal. Oh, I would say it's not that your other is not, but it was before the wild color. And I looked at the painting, and I saw down underneath, it said R.V. Thomas on it. I said, "What? This can't be Russell," but it was. But what gave you the idea for what you call the wild color portrait?
I was, as a younger artist, very much, too much in my head. I was very finicky, and I'd spend a lot of time, and I took it really seriously. And there was a point a number of years ago when I realized I've got to take myself less seriously. And I decided to have fun with painting. It's a simple shift. And the other thing was, and this was after some reflection, I used to go to painting as a way of coping after tragedy or loss. It was my self-protection mechanism, if you will. But then about 4 years ago, I started painting out of a place of happiness and having fun. And those two things led to this wild color style. It didn't come from any other artist. It's not a recognized style per se. I've decided to have fun with color, and when I do workshops with people, I invite them to do the same. And we kind of start by looking at, what is it we want to paint? And yesterday I painted a picture of a giraffe from the Calgary Zoo, a photo that I'd taken, and the giraffe chomping on this little tree. And there are a lot of weird colors in this painting of a giraffe, but people love it. And they love color, especially if it's somebody or a pet that they've lost. All of a sudden seeing their loved one or their beloved pet with all of these wonderful colors, it brings joy to them in an inexplicable way, and makes them feel a little bit better about their loss. And I keep evolving it. It's different today than it was a year ago, and certainly very different than it was when I started 4 years ago. And I have no idea where it's going next. That's the beautiful thing about art. It's not something you do over and over. You just keep evolving and changing, much like if you're a musician or a writer. It's a great journey, the end of which you have no idea what it's going to be. It's awesome.
You talk about the creative element of what you do, but at the same time, too, you talk about the discipline that's involved in producing these things. And a lot of time we talk about people aren't able to make their dreams come alive because they lack the discipline to make it happen.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've always been this way, but I've become this way where I have a regular pattern when I go out in the studio. No matter if I'm feeling inspired or not, I have a pattern and I stick to it. And it's served me really well. I've also been somewhat of a taskmaster, if you will. I've produced a lot of work in a very short period of time. It's over 900 original new paintings in the last 4 years. And it requires a dedication to the task for sure. And I think because I'm a little bit long in the tooth, I have a set of tools that I've developed over my life. And I think one of the greatest things for me, and it's a quote that I like to repeat, which is, "The seeds of my success are sown in soil rich with failure." It's my favorite quote. And I think I came up with it. It was a number of years ago. I've had a lot of failures in my life, and I've messed up, and I feel like at the ripe old age of 50, I kind of got some things figured out. I'm still learning for sure. And every project that I do, I learn something else. And every project that scares me is a good project. Who is it? Eleanor Roosevelt said that do something every day that scares you.
Scares you, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I'm painting the project I'm working on right now. It's not what I normally do. It's a painting of a house that was lost in the fire of 2016 for a family that loved that house. And so I'm painting a house, not what I normally do, and it scares me to death, but I'm doing it and I'm learning something. So there is that discipline.
I was going to ask you about that quote, but you beat me to it.
It's my favorite quote. And I talk to people, especially when they're having a really hard time. And I say to them, you're probably not going to want to hear this right now, but if you can shift your way of thinking about whatever's happened to you as being a gift from God, it will help, because it truly is a gift. Whatever this tragedy is that's happened to you, it's a gift because it's going to lead you to where you need to be tomorrow. It's part of that. And somewhere in my life, after having burdened many, many sad things that have happened, I learned that. And I learned to reframe negative things to be positive. And it served me incredibly well.
That's a good point, Russell. Looking back on my life, I think, too, the things that we go through, some maybe not as tragic, but they were difficult situations in life that we've had to face. And yet I look back at it, I think, with